Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. First of all, happy holidays, happy winter solstice, and happy Cancer full moon. Today I wanted to take a minute to talk to you guys about a fun little astrological tidbit. I hope you don't mind me doing something that's a little bit more short form for this first full moon video. It is the holidays, please have mercy. And the subject that I wanted to kind of talk about in this video is the difference between the mean and the true nodes and which one you should use. So first, let's back up a second and kind of define what the nodes are so that we have an easier time making sense of like what I'm going to say. So the north and the south node of the moon are non-planetary mathematical points. And this is a little bit of like right out the gate, I'm in a little bit of a controversy because there are some forms of astrology, particularly the Yodish form of astrology, the Yodish tradition, that does view the north and south node, Rahu and Ketu, as planets. They are sort of grouped with the planets as grahas, and they're sort of like in the invisible planets. Even in the Western and Middle Eastern traditions of astrology, in astrological texts that have a section about or, talk about the North and South node, they are almost always, I'm trying to think, I can't think of an exception, included at the end of the section about the planet. So usually it'll be like, this is the nature of Saturn, and goes on and talks about Saturn, and then Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, the moon. And then it'll be the north and the south node kind of usually together in a much smaller section at the end. So even though they're not considered planets in the Western and Middle Eastern tradition, they are still kind of like grouped with them, just as sort of like not really having another place to go. So the north and the south node are a mathematical point that represent the intersection between the path of the sun and the path of the moon. So these are, the two luminaries have their own specific orbits, but they do intersect in two places. And this is where an eclipse will occur. So from a practical standpoint, wherever a node is represents where an eclipse has a potential to be. That potential is then sort of actualized when the sun and the moon are close to those nodes together. Either they are very close to a conjunction with the same node, or they are very close to an opposition alongside the nodes. So when we have the sun, moon, and a node together in a very close proximity, that's a solar eclipse. And when we have a sun-moon opposition that's very close to the nodes, we have a lunar eclipse. So that's sort of your quick astronomical overview of what the nodes actually are. They're just mathematical points that represent the intersection between the sun and the moon. And when the sun and moon are together with a node, we have an eclipse that's produced. But why do we have options for this? Why do we have a true node? Why do we have a mean node? And why would I pick one or the other? Well, this mostly just comes down to calculational concepts and your preference to which one you would prefer. But what exactly is the difference between the mean and the true node? Well, most of it comes down to just sort of like calculational perspective, and that unlocks a few features depending on exactly what it is. So I'm going to try to draw this out. It's going to be beautiful. You're going to love it. And just remember that it's Christmas. But you may have heard, rumor has it that the Earth has a moon, and the moon is smaller than the Earth, and the moon orbits the Earth. All of these things are true. But the Earth and the moon's relationship is a little bit different from what we would normally expect from a planet-satellite kind of situation. A lot of the times, when a planet has a satellite, the satellite orbits from the middle of the planet, like, exactly around the center of the planet. But because the moon because the moon is so large compared to Earth, what actually happens is instead of orbiting from the middle, the moon and the Earth share like a barycenter. They share a center of gravity that's about like 3/4 out of the Earth's surface. So technically, the Earth and the moon are sort of orbiting around one another from this pivot point that's kind of in Earth, but not in the center of Earth. And this is the reason why the moon only shows the one face towards the Earth. The whole dark side of the moon thing. We don't really see what's going on the other side of the moon because of this kind of like entrapment cycle that we have with the moon. And this is what the true node focuses on. The true node calculates from this shared Earth-Moon barycenter, and this does a couple of weird things with it. So first of all, you're probably familiar with the nodes. They're retrograde a lot. Unlike the other planets, the nodes are almost constantly retrograde. But with the true node, because it takes this more precise point of origin for like the moon's orbit and the calculation of the moon's path from this orbit, the true node in an astrological chart will not always be retrograde. Sometimes it will be direct, either for like a few hours or maybe for a couple of days. But you'll see this sort of like backwards motion, and then we got a wobble, and then we're going backwards again. And this is all just like kind of correcting the orbit, like the little wobble of it all, of the moon's pathway. This corrects it, and so this ends up being a little bit more of like a mathematically accurate picture of the node and of the moon's relationship with the Earth. fixed with these little wobbles where the planet will be, or where the node will be retrograde, then direct, and then retrograde again, and kind of maintaining that retrograde, that backwards motion throughout the zodiac. Now, the mean node is a little bit different. The mean node says, actually, I'm not going to do any of that. What the mean node does is it calculates the moon's orbit around the Earth as if it were actually geocentric, like we normally see in planet-satellite relationships. So whereas the true node is calculating kind of 3/4 out from the center of the Earth, the mean node is calculating right for the middle of the Earth, this kind of geocentric perspective. And this evens it out. This makes the node move around much smoother because we're sort of approximating more the actual position of the moon's orbit. This difference is not a lot, it's maybe about 1.5 degrees. But by giving up this grip on like mathematical accuracy, what we do is we allow for the path of the node to be much more consistent, to where it's always retrograde. So while the true node can sometimes be direct, the mean node will always be retrograde because it's sort of averaging out the moon's motion by sort of more approximating it, and that eclipse intersection point along with it. But yeah, that's basically all the differences between the mean and the true node. The true node is more topocentric, the mean node is more geocentric. And which one you want to do will depend kind of on you. So that was your more in-depth explanation of the differences between the mean and the true node. The mean node is geocentric, it is more evened out, and it is a little bit less precise. The true node is, I don't know if it would be 100% accurate to describe it this way, but more topocentric, more exact, and a little bit more erratic in how it moves around. As far as which one you should use, that is not something that I can really advise on very heavily. I'm not sure there is really a right answer. I think it mostly just comes down to which argument you prefer or which kind of matches your own style and understanding of astrology. So I believe I checked in a few different places, and in a lot of places online, the true node ends up being the default calculation formula in it. I don't know if that necessarily continues on in like more private software. I don't know. I know, I remember, I don't know, years and years ago, when I first noticed that there was a difference between the mean and the true node, I picked the true node in my software, in the software I was using at the time. So I was like, it's the true node. Like, it must be real, right? Like, that must be the real one. They can't just call it true without it being the real one. Like, what does that even mean? Little did I know that people can do whatever they want, call things whatever the hell they want. So that was the choice that I made at the time. Now I'm much more, I use the mean node now exclusively. But I imagine that individuals who use the true node do so because kind of a similar thought pattern that I had, that it's the true one, it's more exact, it's more precise, and that precision with the node is something that they need for whatever reason. Like, they feel more comfortable with it, and that's fine. The differences between the mean and the true node are never that great. I think it's like never more than like 1.5 degrees different. So you're not going to see a whole lot of change with it, no matter which one you use, unless, of course, you are somebody who has the node very close to a sign boundary, in which case swapping between the two might put your node in a different sign. Whether or not the sign the node is in actually means anything, well, I guess that's a whole other discussion. But it's something to consider. Those people who have the node closer to a boundary where it will switch signs depending on what one they utilize will probably have much more insight into this than I would. It's also worth noting that my astrological practice does not heavily go into the nodes. So, like, if I were an evolutionary astrologer, I would probably have a lot more of an opinion about a node and which one is best. But for me personally, why I chose the mean node has more to do with like a coherent calculation system, in that the mean node is geocentric. It's geocentric in its calculation, just like everything else in astrology. And it feels really odd to me to have something kind of tacked on at the end that's not geocentric. And the fact that the mean node just kind of like continuously moves along without these like weird erratic patterns to it is just sort of like an added bonus to it. So I think that's really that's what it came down to for me, was just knowing that this is geocentric, the difference isn't that far off, and everything else in astrology, aside from like a house system, of course, is geocentrically calculated. So this feels like a weird add-on that I'm not sure what additional use I would get out of, other than like the weird sort of like cognitive fracturing of my brain, knowing that I have something that's more topocentrically calculated in my chart when it probably shouldn't be. But like I said, whichever one you use is really going to come down to whichever one you find maybe more compelling, or you can craft an argument for. Those are just the ones that I could assume, and one that I use personally. So obviously no bias. It's the mean node. You should obviously use the mean nodes. So there's your difference between your mean and your true node. Hopefully that's brought a little bit more perspective to this issue, even though it probably was not an issue that you thought much of. But if it was something you had wondered, well, there you go. And if it's not something that you had wondered about, well, here's a free nugget of information for you to like obsess over, and decide right now which node you'll use for the rest of your life. But no, play with it, have fun with it, see what makes the most sense to you, kind of like argue it, both ways, and see where you land. But thank you guys so much for watching. Everybody, hope you have a safe and happy holidays and a happy new year. And I will see you guys in 2025. Wait. No, I won't. Well, I hope to. 2024. We have to go through 2024 first, but hopefully I will see you in 2025. I'm so dumb. Here's a video breaking down the difference between the mathematical calculations and the astronomical realities of the mean and the true node, but I don't know what year it is. Okay. Have a good one, everybody.